Could the SEC be headed for a 9-game conference slate as early as next year? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. Bryan Fischer from SI.com is going to join us, and we'll talk with him about a piece he has up on the SEC and potentially going to a 9-game conference slate. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers, you can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's over at FanDuel.com. All right, we mentioned it. SEC meetings will be getting underway in Destin in just a handful of days. And one of the big things on the docket that is expected to be discussed is, will the conference move to a 9-game SEC slate? And some people thinking that it could happen as quickly as 2026. Remember, with the expansion of Oklahoma and Texas added 2 years ago, we did this, they agreed, we're going to keep it 8 games and here's the schedule. And then for 2025, they said, okay, we're going to keep it at 8 again. And we're just going to flip those same opponents. Whoever you played at home, you're going to play it away and vice versa. So obviously there's been a lot of push to potentially going to a 9-game conference slate. The ESPN Disney have even intimated they're willing to pay the price. So it's not about money as much anymore. The price tag's there. But I think what Greg Sankey and the league office is worried about is, we just had a couple of 3-loss teams just miss the playoff last year. We need those automatic bids. If we're going to guarantee half our league another loss, we got to make sure that we're getting at least 4 teams in, especially when the conference or the playoff goes to an expanded, whatever it is, 16 plus playoff games. So we'll talk more on that with Bryan Fischer coming up in just a second, but certainly a big, big topic. Let's get to some other news happening around the conference. ESPN, they put out a list of their top non-quarterbacks for 2025. Of course, look, there's a lot of great players all over the country, and so much of the focus is on just the quarterbacks. So kind of interesting. 7 SEC players made the list of, their top 25 non-quarterbacks for 2025. Making the list: Ryan Williams, Alabama wide receiver; Dylan Stewart, the edge rusher from South Carolina; Texas linebacker Anthony Hill; A&M running back Leveon Moss making this list. Pretty surprising there because who was it? I think Greg McElroy put out his top 10 running backs a few months ago, and he didn't have Leveon Moss in there. And he explained it was due to injury, him coming off of the injury. The 3 other guys who make this list from the SEC: Caleb Banks, Florida defensive tackle; R. Mason Thomas, the Oklahoma defensive end; and how about Jaden Baugh, Florida running back, making this list? So, again, it's just it's Adam Rittenberger, ESPN. It's his opinion, but pretty interesting to say that those 7 guys from the SEC made the list. Again, it was non-quarterbacks, so take out Lenore Sellers and Arch Manning and Garrett Nussmeier and all those guys that might make this list. But no denying, Ryan Williams, Dylan Stewart, Anthony Hill, all studs, and then Leveon Moss, R. Mason Thomas, Caleb Banks, and Jaden Baugh. Now, speaking of Leveon Moss, we did get an update from Mike Elko on Leveon Moss and where he is injury-wise, and this was coming out Wednesday night. He'll be ready to go. Mike Elko saying he expects Leveon Moss to be ready for August camp. Quote, he will be 100% for sure for fall camp. When you go out there and watch him run, he looks really good right now. That was Mike Elko speaking at the Brazos County A&M Club. So talking to the boosters or big money people, they want to hear good news, and he brought them good news. So certainly, look, that is going to be, I think maybe we're not talking enough about A&M and how well they ran the football last year. And obviously they lost Reuben Owens before the season. That was a big loss. The big dynamic stud freshman from the year prior. Amari Daniels did his thing. Leveon Moss was awesome. They get that 3-headed monster back along with, I believe E.J. Smith is still hanging around, right? Emmitt Smith's son. So that's a loaded backfield. As long as that offensive line holds up, Marcel Reed takes another step. A&M will if we're going to get in our bold predictions in the summer, one you might want to think about putting on there is, A&M may lead the league in rushing. Not a crazy prediction. All right. In other news, how about over at Ole Miss? They landed another transfer quarterback in the portal. Rebels earning a commitment from former Rice quarterback, and we'll just spell out the name, Shawqui, Shockey, and the last name is Itraish. Itrash. Bear with me on that. But anyway, he spent the last 3 seasons at Rice, entered the transfer portal, visited Oxford earlier this month, and made his official announcement. He's the 3rd transfer quarterback to join Ole Miss this offseason, looking to build out that quarterback room behind Austin Simmons. They also have commitments from Trinidad Chambliss coming in from Ferris State, and then Maya Liuaki Smith from Oklahoma State. Man, I'm going to need a pronunciation guide for the Ole Miss quarterbacks. Austin Simmons I can get. That one's easy. But this Rice kid does not have experience at the higher FBS level, did not attempt a pass in 2024, and served mostly as a backup for Rice. So, look, no disrespect, clipboard holder for Ole Miss if all goes well. That's probably the hope. All right, over at Tennessee, they picked up a commitment from a 4-star pass rusher in-state, Zach Groves, from Cross Plains, Tennessee. And he's committed to head to Tennessee for the class of 2026. Big recruiting win for the Vols. He chose Tennessee over the likes of Georgia, Ole Miss, Florida State, and Auburn, and is considered one of the top edge prospects, the number 25 edge in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, number 7 player from the state of Tennessee. So big in-state recruit to keep there. That's good. All right, a couple other basketball nuggets here I got to throw out at you guys. If you missed this, Zakai Ziegler over at Tennessee announcing he is filing a suit against the NCAA for a 5th year of eligibility, citing potential NIL opportunities he could get. So most of the articles I've read on this say they don't think he has a chance here, but they made the ruling on the Diego Pavia ruling, right, with the JUCO stuff. There are a lot of guys coming for that extra year, and the NCAA is actually denying some of them. But again, there are suits focusing on not counting D1 seasons such as JUCO or Division II. Ziegler is focusing broadly on eligibility and redshirt rules. Standard NCAA D1 eligibility is 4 seasons and 5 years, with waivers granted for hardships and medical reasons and stuff like that. So we'll see if he gets it. I mean, look, he's an incredible player. Would love to see him back another year in the SEC, but I would call it a long shot at this point. Another basketball nugget, Josh Hubbard from Mississippi State announced he is pulling out of the NBA draft, and he's heading back to Starkville for another season. So good for him. Averaged, standout sophomore last year, averaged 18.9 points per game, led the Bulldogs to their 3rd consecutive NCAA tournament appearance. Has been an all-SEC selection as a freshman and a sophomore. So he posted to social media, Bulldog Nation, I'm back. And then one other note, Kentucky landed a commitment from elite 4-star small forward out of West Virginia, Braden Hawthorne. He is heading to play for Mark Pope and company. So a couple of basketball nuggets there for you. One quick baseball nugget. And yeah, the baseball is going on right now, so it's changing every day. So we'll get you caught up at the end of this weekend when the regionals are set and who all made it and who didn't. But one quick nugget here, Georgia is hanging on to Wes Johnson. On Wednesday, they announced a contract extension with a raise for their head baseball coach who just finished his 2nd season there in Athens. His new deal runs through 2031. So congrats to Wes Johnson. He has certainly exceeded expectations so far there in Athens, and he's done a fantastic job for Georgia. All right, when we return here on Locked On SEC, we will talk with Bryan Fischer of SI.com. We'll get his thoughts on the latest on what's happening with the SEC and potentially going to a 9-game conference slate as early as possibly next year. More Locked On SEC coming your way after this. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Hey guys, if you haven't been paying attention, I don't know what you've been watching, but the NBA playoffs, they are in full swing, and every night has been super fun and exciting. We're already into the conference finals, and whether you're just watching as a fan or, hey, you want to get a little bit competitive with some more skin in the game, you need to go check out our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel makes it so easy for you to stay in the game, whether it's betting a line before tip-off, whether it's making some live bets, you like a team minus this in the second half, or whatever you want to do, they got it up there for you over at FanDuel. They got player props, same game parlays, all that stuff, and you as a fan will have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Go check them out at FanDuel.com. If you're new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. You head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and you will get $200 in bonus bets. No better time to get in there. I've been telling you guys, a lot of college football stuff will be coming as well. They got a lot of week 1 lines up there already for some of those big games. Win totals for a lot of SEC teams up there as well. So much stuff for you guys to check out. If you've never signed up before, I encourage you guys to do it. Go to FanDuel.com, sign up today, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get those $200 in bonus bets. Go make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Right along here, Locked On SEC, and a pleasure to talk with this guy, a guy who's been covering college football for many, many years. Been places like Fox, CBS, Yahoo Sports. He's now at SI.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Bryan D. Fischer, Brian with a Y, and he joins us now. Brian, welcome in, man. How are you?
Oh, I'm staying busy in this offseason, that's for sure. It's usually a pretty slow time of year, but that's not the case anymore, certainly not in the SEC and certainly not in college athletics right now.
Yeah, man. What offseason is what I tell people now, from the transfer portal to the early signing period. Everything. There is no offseason now. It's just constant stories and evolution and, college football playoff expansion. Everything is constantly changing, and I want to dive right into it because I was reading your piece earlier this week. It feels like we've been talking about for years, Brian, about the SEC potentially going from an 8-game to a 9-game conference schedule. But based on what you're hearing, based where we are right now, how close are we to moving to a 9-game SEC slate?
Well, I feel like we've been close really ever since a couple of summers ago when Texas and Oklahoma joined the league. It kind of seemed like it was going to be fait accompli that, there was going to be that move to 9 games. But I think there ultimately was a big discussion with SEC, not only the SEC, but their media partners and especially ESPN once they kind of took over all those rights that, we're not going to move to 9 games from a conference-wide perspective and give up some revenue. There's got to be a little sweetener in there. And I think ESPN had initially kind of pushed back at that and kind of hemmed and hawed, but it does sound like, especially after the success, ratings-wise that they had last year, that they've kind of opened the door for maybe paying a little bit more for that 9th conference game. And obviously that gets everybody kind of interested in terms of if there is additional money on the table. So I think it's more realistic than it was, say, a year or two ago. Whether there will be some actual movement there in those spring meetings in Destin, I think that's still to be determined. A lot of moving pieces. There's definitely going to be a lot of discussion, surrounding the House case with the college football playoff, kind of other factors at play that is definitely going to occupy the coaches and ADs and school presidents' times. But, I think we're probably closer to moving to actual 9 games and maybe even actually making, a vote maybe contingent on a college football playoff format. Probably than we have been the last couple of years. So I think that's good news for SEC fans and probably good news for college football in general as well.
Yeah, no doubt. It seemed like the discussion for so long, the money seemed like the biggest hurdle in this debate. But, at least, and you reported on it too, it sounds like ESPN and Disney are willing to pay that premium to add another week of conference games. So if that hurdle is jumped, it would seem to me now, I guess obviously Greg Sankey wants that confirmation that, hey, if we do expand the playoff, the SEC, we need some of these automatic bids, right? Because, in adding another game, you're adding half your conference another loss to their schedule. So, to me, that kind of seems like the next big hurdle, right?
Yeah, and I think it has not gone lost on a lot of folks that, let's face it, the past 2 national champions played in the Big Ten. They play 9-game conference schedule. Obviously, other teams and other conferences that have played 9-game schedules have been able to have success in the postseason these last couple of years as well. So I think that also adds to kind of the factor that let's figure out the CFP format. Let's see if there are automatic bids. Look, the SEC along with the Big Ten have kind of control over the future of the playoff, come 2026 and beyond. And, I think that's going to be top of mind for a lot of athletic directors in terms of, if we are, as you say, adding that extra loss for a lot of our teams, how can we make sure that there's at least that access component to the CFP, especially if there's not maybe something written into kind of what the committee is being directed to in terms of valuing that strength of schedule. I think that's been another thing that could possibly be in the cards as well. If there's not some agreement on those automatic bids, which, frankly, have gotten a lot of pushback, from other leagues like the Big Ten and the ACC. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. I think it's going to still continue to play out. There is a CFP meeting in mid-June that, hopefully a lot of these issues will be resolved. I know the commissioners met this past weekend to kind of talk about more conversations over the format, and that's going to play a big role in terms of moving to 9 conference games. The other thing too for a lot of these athletic directors, just looking at the scheduling component, you're going to be taking away in 1 year, possibly having an extra home game in some years in conference play, and being only with 4 in other years, and that probably ends up taking away a home game. So, how much are you really going to be made good in terms of losing that lost revenue? Now, certainly it doesn't mean, you're having to pay a group of 5 or an FCS team to come in there and kind of make things up, especially at the end of the season. But, there's a lot of moving pieces, like I said, and, I think we are closer than ever before, and there's a lot of those minor details that seem like they're big hurdles, but I think once the SEC kind of ultimately moves forward with a decision on, all right, we're going to go to 9 games, they can figure a lot of those other things out later. And that sounds like it's probably going to be the topic of conversation, certainly down there in Destin next weekend.
Talking with Bryan Fischer of SI.com, and schedule inequities, Brian, seem like it's always a thing because I went back to Michigan 2 years ago. They get into the the playoff and go on to win national championship, but I think their toughest non-conference game that year was like Bowling Green. I mean, it seems like the committee has not put a lot of focus on they're more focused on you getting a win against an inferior opponent versus getting, a close loss against a top-ranked team. So in that sense, you mentioned in your article, Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina all narrowly missed the playoff last year because they had that third loss. So I got to think that's weighing on the minds of Greg Sankey and some of the athletic directors in the SEC, thinking, look, there has to be a little bit more of a component for strength of schedule. If we're going to play these tough opponents, you got to at least consider us and reward that, as opposed to just playing 4 slappies or 3 slappies in non-conference that you can just roll to easy wins on.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of frustration, not just in the SEC. I mean, we obviously saw Greg Byrne was pretty public, the Alabama athletic director, in terms of maybe making those changes to the schedule if Alabama were going to continue to be left out of the field with that third loss. And I think that's weighing on the minds of a lot of folks. In terms of looking at the bigger picture. How much is that strength of schedule weighed? And I think there's definitely a belief in the SEC and the Big Ten that conference play and regardless if it's a loss or a win, it should be weighted a little bit heavier in those leagues compared to the Big 12 and the ACC. That's why there is that conversation surrounding these automatic qualifiers, and there's ultimately going to be a bigger impact on non-conference scheduling. If there's not maybe something a little bit more written in stone, in terms of the selection committee's kind of directives when they are picking and choosing these teams. It is very, very broad. Anytime you go through that kind of mock selection committee exercise, or you talk to members of the committee in terms of how they evaluate their process, it is pretty flexible in terms of one committee member might value strength of schedule a little bit differently. And so I think there is at least some conversations come 2026, even possibly as early as 2025. I know the straight seating has gotten a lot of press, but I think directions towards the committee in terms of valuing things a little bit more could also be in the cards. So I think there's a lot of stuff for the commissioners in particular to kind of consider, hopefully nail down in these next couple of weeks, because we are kind of getting close to brass tacks, and ultimately it's impacting their league. They're all meeting with their ADs and coaches over these last couple of weeks. Big Ten currently in the middle of meetings right now, and this is a big topic of conversation for a lot of folks in terms of, hey, let's get a decision so that can, the other 3 or 4 that we have to end up making as a conference, we can kind of get on with it, because nobody wants to see this kind of lingering further into the summer, especially given all that has to happen on campus and within these football programs in particular, when it comes to all the stuff that with the House settlement, if that ultimately ends up getting approved here in the next couple of weeks as well. So a lot on everybody's plate, and I think everybody would ideally like some clarity sooner rather than later.
Continue our conversation with Bryan Fischer of SI.com. And Brian, just one more wrinkle on this SEC 9-game conference slate. It's been proposed in the past, and I think it makes the most sense mathematically. But from what you understand, if they do approve this and go forward with it, it would be, you'd play 9 SEC games. You would have your 3 permanents that, are going to be your big rivalry games, and then 6 rotating. And again, the math works out. You could play this 6 this year. You can play the other 6 the next year. So mathematically, it makes sense. But I think you brought up an interesting part of this too. Maybe rotating those 3 or at least reevaluating those 3 permanent, because there will be some inequities there. I mean, I bring up Auburn all the time. Their traditional rivalry with Alabama and Georgia, I think it's a little unfair if Auburn's got to play Bama and Georgia every year, and somebody else may get, I don't know, Vandy and Mizzou or something.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a topic of conversation, and that's kind of just what the conference offices had come up with a couple of years ago. I think that's going to be kind of the baseline. I think when that proposal was kind of initially circulated, there was certainly some mixed reactions. You mentioned Auburn there with their permanent crossovers. I mean, you look at Texas. They're almost always going to be penciled in to play. Oklahoma and Texas A&M, and then obviously Arkansas with the historic ties with that program would, you figure would be one, but maybe there is something where you rotate that third one in. And I think it's going to be a topic of conversation. Some schools just simply have 3 natural rivals that you can easily pencil in there, and others don't. And so I think there is going to be a bit of a competitive equity kind of component to either that third conference opponent or how those other 6 kind of rotate in. And I think it's all kind of up in the air right now. And I think proof positive would be nice for a lot of us. I think being able to see this in practice. Let's go through a couple of rotations, because the bottom line right now, just the way the schedule is, not only limited to the 8 games, but I mean, you still got teams that have just joined the league that you're looking at 5 or 10 years before they make some of these road trips to some of their conference opponents. And I think everybody tends to agree that that's not great for the league. That's not great for these fan bases that want to either go to these venues or have some of those fan bases come into to their own home venues. So I think it's probably the starting point at this point in terms of picking up that discussion from a couple of years ago. And I would imagine that that component, more than anything, is probably going to get the fan bases talking about it a lot more than those in the conference office and in the AD shops that are going to be ultimately weighing and kind of voting on what this ends up becoming.
I'd be remiss if I didn't get a quick thought from you on this upcoming college football season. I mean, I look at some of the teams that were big powers. Obviously, Ohio State, the reigning national champs, but they lose a ton to the draft. Texas, Notre Dame. I mean, they're all expected to be good again, but it does seem like in this new age of the expanded playoff, Brian, that this thing is a little bit wide open. I mean, you can make a case from anybody from Clemson to Penn State to LSU. I mean, there's a bunch of teams at the top that I think you can make a realistic case that can make a run for a championship this year.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you kind of go back to last year, it definitely felt like the Ohio States and the Oregons and whatnot were kind of just a bit of a cut above. And, I think this year, especially amongst those quote elite or top tier groups. I mean, it's easy to identify flaws right now at this point in the off season, but it's also just as easy to imagine a lot of the strengths. And I think the fact that we have recognized these last couple of years about how valuable it is to have that continuity amongst guys from class to class to come back in. You just can't kind of change over a roster wholesale. You can have some success doing that, certainly, and we've seen some prominent examples of that. But in terms of really contending for the CAP, really making a run at that national title, you got to have that continuity on the roster. I think that's why there is a lot of talk about Penn State. They're kind of running things back with the bulk of their roster that made it to a semifinal last year. I think Clemson, a trendy pick, given that how well they performed and what they have coming back, especially if you talk about the NFL evaluations for a lot of their elite guys that they'll have having another year in the system. I think Texas is right there and probably one of the more interesting cases. You actually get Georgia, the Alabamas of the world, it is pretty wide open. And when you factor in a lot of those schedules, you can kind of understand how this year in particular might be a bit of a headache for the committee if we kind of see things playing out as they do coming out of spring ball.
Last thing for you, Brian, are you all aboard the Arch Manning hype train like I am?
I am. I think it's, not only just, we certainly have the limited sample size of what he can do, and the name certainly adds to everything. But, when you kind of sit back there and watch him, I mean, he's got the NFL size. He's mobile. I think that escapability, he thought, I think last year he did get a little rushed in his decision making a little bit at times. And I think that was probably just, being thrown in there at times. I mean, like, all right, Arch, go face that Georgia pass rush, after we pull, Quinn, like those type of moments when he might have been a little bit wide-eyed. I think that's going to go away. And I think you are going to see the progression from him as a quarterback, just knowing his family history, how much he puts into the draft. And honestly, the Texas coaches, are more excited, I think, than anybody to kind of build around Arch. They like their skill position talent that they have there. Certainly some question marks along the offensive line in terms of what they got to replace in front of him. But, this is a team that is consistently recruited at the high level. He's going to have the weapons. And I think when you look around the SEC, this is a pretty good year for quarterbacks. But, having that last name Manning on it and playing under a program like Texas, that's going to mean a lot. And so I think, he will not be eased into things given their opener and playing at Ohio State. But I can't wait to see him take the field and really kind of own that position because, we have seen that in the past with that jersey name. And I think for Longhorn fans, for SEC fans, it's going to be a fun season following his progress and seeing what he can do.
Yeah, I head down to the Manning Passing Academy every year, and I got to think there's going to be just a little bit more media there in line to get in questions for Arch Manning again this year. It's pretty crazy. Brian, appreciate the time, man. Great stuff over at SI.com. Would encourage everybody to go check out the piece discussing the SEC and the 9-game conference schedule. And you do a great job, man. Really appreciate you taking some time with us.
Absolutely. Good to be on with you guys and appreciate the time here.
All right, there he goes. That is Bryan Fischer of SI.com. And that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Appreciate you guys for making us your first listen every day. Reminder to subscribe and check us out wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, for your second listen, you can check out the portal with our buddy Brian Smith covering all the latest offseason track and movement of players moving through the portal, latest on recruiting, all that. Brian Smith has got you covered as our Locked On Recruiting Insider. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Thanks again to Bryan Fischer for joining us. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Coming back and see us right here on Locked On SEC.